What could be more innocuous than something as simple as a childish prank like egging a house or throwing toilet paper in the trees? But what if there was something more devious behind the intent, and eggs weren't the only things that were going to be thrown, as a firearm would get involved and lives would be lost?
What you are about to hear is believed to be real, based on witness accounts, testimonies, and public record. This is terrifying and true.
Tonight, we'll be raising some serious questions about life and death, the unpredictability of it all, and how one gunshot can leave hundreds mourning. Death, no doubt, is difficult to deal with, but when it comes to murder, it gets even more challenging, especially when the murder is as senseless as the case we're diving into tonight. So, get yourself some Halloween candy, a cozy blanket because it's fall now, and get ready. With the Halloween season upon us, this story may not take place on the holiday, but it involves a favorite pastime of Halloween. We'll dive into the gruesome details after these words from our sponsors. In a quiet town in Georgia, on a fateful summer day, an ill-intentioned prank took a dark and deadly turn. It was July 3rd, when 3 teenagers, Sydney Maugham, Jeremy Munson, and Mackenzie Davenport, left on a mission to egg a house. While this may sound like typical rebellious teenage behavior, unfortunately this was no ordinary act of mischief. It was driven by an ongoing lovers' quarrel. As the sun began to set, the teens targeted the house of Jonathan Gilbert in Griffin, a 22-year-old man who had recently achieved certification as a cell phone tower engineer in Texas and had returned to Georgia. Understanding very little about the gravity of the situation and how their senseless act would not just alter their own lives but also break the lives of many others. At around 4:30 p.m., Jonathan, also known as Tyler Lane, noticed the teenagers egging his house, which was located on Dobbins Mill Road. Consequently, he went out of his house, unarmed, to confront them, not realizing that his desire to protect his house would eventually lead to his untimely demise. He went ahead and tried to stop the teens, angrily accusing them of vandalizing his property, and it was this exact moment that set the stage for a tragedy, as what began as a mischievous prank swiftly escalated into a catastrophe. This is what happened. As Jonathan tried to knock some sense into the teens, they argued, but after a few unpleasant exchanges, the teenagers rushed to their car. One of them pulled out a gun and shot him multiple times. His lifeless body was left alone on the road as the teens sped off. What's even more tragic here is how the teens also snatched a necklace Tyler was wearing after shooting him. This necklace contained his father's ashes. Just imagine for a moment his plight, dying from gunshots, having someone of such high emotional value being snatched away from him in his very last moments. Absolutely heart-wrenching. So pretty much in a matter of a few painful seconds, Jonathan Gilbert lost his life. One very important detail that remains unclear here, though, was their intentions. Did the teens plan on only egging the house, or was killing a thought as well? But if it wasn't premeditated, why would a bunch of teens carry a weapon with them? That's not exactly normal, even in Georgia. There is a theory which suggests that this was all very clearly planned out. The teens would start vandalizing his property, wait for him to notice, and as soon as he would come out of the house, they would use their weapon to shoot him. While the reasons behind their hatred for Jonathan were quite childish, as we'll soon address, many found it difficult to believe that a bunch of teens could kill someone so young over something so ridiculously small. However, if we think of the event from that perspective, the idea that it was all planned out does make a lot of sense. This angle of the case in particular has been popularly discussed since the day of the crime. While many believe that this was never a mischievous prank to begin with, others argue that it was only Gilbert's anger that instigated them to fire. Moving forward, Sidney Maugham, Jeremy Munson, and Mackenzie Davenport now faced an unthinkable fate, charged with the malicious murder of Jonathan Gilbert. Witnesses who were present at the crime scene when the murder took place reported all the information to the police. This information led investigators to a cell phone number linked to one of the suspects, and eventually to the vehicle believed to be involved in the crime. A gun was also discovered in the vehicle, which the sheriff's office suggested was the firearm used to shoot and kill Gilbert. Authorities identified Maugham as the one who pulled the trigger in this tragic incident. However, investigators asserted that all three individuals bear responsibility because they collectively embarked on a criminal mission that led to a fatal outcome. The Spalding County Sheriff, Darrell Dix, made it clear that their collective actions held them all responsible for this tragedy. Dix even went as far as to state that they went to egg a house, all three of them as a group, a seemingly trivial act, and yet it culminated in a loss of life. A young man confronted them hoping to protect his property, and he paid the ultimate price. The teenagers then callously drove away, leaving his lifeless body in the middle of the road. They had done all of this together, so all three would suffer the consequences. In addition to the grave charge of malice murder, the trio also faced accusations of battery and criminal trespassing. Sidney Maugham, believed to be the one who fired the fatal shots along with Jeremy Munson, faced even more serious charges, including murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime. To this day, the exact and clear motive behind this senseless act remains quite the mystery. Sheriff Darrell Dix, too, has not offered a lot of insight, simply stating that it appeared to be linked to an ongoing romantic dispute. Whether Jonathan Gilbert was directly involved in this dispute, however, remains unclear. Although this case is quite twisted, we can't establish for a fact that the lovers' quarrel police kept repeating was the only reason. We do have interviews conducted by news agencies that have some insights to offer in the matter. An interview with Kaylee Morgan, for instance, revealed that she was Tyler's best friend and one very important factor in this entire lovers' quarrel situation. She and Tyler had gotten very close as friends recently, and she had invited him to her home. And that's when Sidney had come to the house to vandalize it. In order to understand the situation more clearly, there's one more thing you need to know. Sidney was Tyler's ex-girlfriend, and probably did not just want to take out her anger on Tyler. She also probably suspected a romantic relationship between Tyler and Kaylee. And so, over something so childish and petty as not having the dignity to move on from a relationship that was over, a young life was tragically lost, mercilessly taken away. Now, some of us might be wondering if it makes sense to charge all three with malicious murder for what initially appeared as a simple act of vandalism. To shed some light on this issue, let's have some insight into the legal perspective and understand the event in its entirety. This murder situation can be compared to a bank robbery scenario. In a bank heist, there are typically individuals with distinct roles: a driver, a person who enters the bank to commit the robbery, and a lookout. Each plays a very crucial role, and they all participate in the crime as a collective effort. and therefore if any one is charged with the crime of stealing the money, others involved are also held accountable, regardless of the role they played. Similarly, in this case we're discussing, all three individuals were active participants in the events that unfolded. It is not unreasonable to assume that they were all aware of the presence of a firearm in the car, as well as the intent to engage in criminal activity. Even the act of purchasing the eggs to be used in the vandalism can be viewed as a conscious involvement in this collective action. Hence, it was only reasonable that all three individuals face charges in connection with this incident. It's indeed regrettable that they didn't anticipate the dire consequences of their actions, but, legally speaking, they were all knowing participants in this ill-fated endeavor. Imagine for a moment if they had gotten away with it, if they'd never figured out who shot this man. Well, then those three would be complicit in the evasion of justice. This true crime case really highlights the concept of shared responsibility in the eyes of the law. While the circumstances may differ, it serves as a stark reminder that individuals involved in a crime, regardless of their specified role, can be held accountable. Now that we've discussed the details related to the actual murder, let's also explore the aftermath and the heartfelt remembrance of the young life that was lost far too soon. Family and friends of the victim gathered in Flo Villa to remember the 22-year-old Jonathan Griffin and pay their respects to Tyler, celebrating his love for fishing and his recent baptism. Quote, "I have a hole in my soul and my spirit that will never be filled," expressed one family member. Tyler's grandmother too fondly recalled his infectious smile and the radiance of his big, expressive blue eyes. She also shared that he was determined to turn his life around, leaving an indelible void in their hearts. As Tyler's family attempts to come to terms with their loss and move forward, they have a heartfelt message for the young people in their community, an appeal to put aside violence and engage in open, empathetic dialogue. They've seen firsthand the senselessness of such actions and the real pain and sorrow they bring. So as we wrap up the heartbreaking story of Jonathan Gilbert, let's try not to remember him as a statistic, but as an actual person, a young man with dreams and aspirations, destroyed by what we would all agree is really just a petty incident of the heart. As of the time of this recording, the three who committed this act have not been sentenced. So let's leave them a little compassion as well. But I can't lie, I do hope they are punished for what they've done. Stories like these are painful because it's easy to not realize how one action can never be undone. When you get in a car with your friends to go and get revenge on someone, and you're told it's something as innocent as an egging of a house, but then a firearm is placed in the car, just in case, I suppose, it's pretty hard to defend that. It's premeditated and heartbreaking. The hardest part about doing Terrifying and True here at Weekly Spooky is the realization that these are actual people, not just black and white that I'm reading. I wanted to shed some light on this story because egging makes us think of Halloween, and Halloween is something fun, but unfortunately some innocent appearing mischief is not such. So let's all agree that we love spooky season so much, we'll keep it all good and clean fun. Let's all enjoy our little moments of being big kids yet again every October, and cherish what we have and those we love. Until next time, my friends, please stay safe. Terrifying and True is narrated by Enrique Couto. It's executive produced by Rob Fields, produced by Daniel Wilder, with original theme music by Ray Mattis. If you have a story you'd like us to cover on the program, send us an email at weeklyspooky@gmail.com. And if you want to support us in a very direct way, go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can support us and allow us to keep the spooky rolling and rolling and rolling. And I want to say a big thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names at the end of the show. And they are Johnny Nix, Bobbletopia.com, Megan Hua, Julia Kirsch, Brent McCullough, Steve King, Karen Weemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time right here on Weekly Spooky and Terrifying and True.